Nepal is one of the most geologically unstable countries on Earth. Major fault lines run beneath large regions, building pressure over centuries. Landslides and sudden ground collapses are ongoing risks, sometimes occurring without warning and far from assistance. These are areas where people live and travel, yet the terrain ultimately controls the outcome. That instability hasn't only influenced settlement, it has produced places that exist under conditions few expect. In Braa village, stone houses were built along an ancient trade route at high altitude, where oxygen levels are low and modern access arrived only recently, yet families stayed for generations. In the Mustang district, people carved dwellings directly into cliff faces, creating entire cave settlements in areas where roads disappear, weather shifts rapidly, and short distances can take days to cross. And Birgunj Lake formed in recent years after sudden geological change, leaving a large body of turquoise water where none had existed before. Stay with me as we uncover Nepal's most extraordinary wonders, where rare discoveries and forgotten mysteries might change the way you see this country forever. Mustang district stretches along dry high valleys where sky caves, red cliffs and stone towns grew side by side like pieces from a long unfinished story. In this site, thousands of caves were carved high into soft cliff walls, where early families slept, cooked and buried loved ones in rooms hanging above the river like stacked nests. Those red cliff faces are linked to a tale of a demon torn apart by a holy warrior, with blood said to have stained the rock and the remains turning into long prayer walls. Harsh, cold, thin air and rocky soil forced local groups to rely on a tight mix of hardy crops and herds, turning each patch of land and livestock into a tool for survival. Yak, sheep, goat, horse and mule herding guided daily routines, with moving animals across ridges serving as both pantry and transport. The wind here tears at prayer flags until the old cloth twists into tight knots along the lines. Wishes would only come true after the fabric tangled that way. Furthermore, fossil stones found nearby are kept in pockets as lucky charms, taken along during a first walk through the main street of Chame village. Native people in this town once survived by transporting salt across mountain passes that could eliminate anyone who misjudged the weather by even half a day. It was carefully read by watching how prayer flags moved, because a wrong guess about snowfall could trap entire households between villages for weeks. They then adapted by building homes from thick local stone that trap warmth inside even when outside temperatures dropped low enough to freeze breath mid-air. These mountain dwellers thrived by mastering routes that outsiders considered impossible, which let them control the flow of goods and gain wealth faster than valley farmers could. When crossing the main bridge, you have to brace yourself for feeling a firm tap on your shoulder in the middle, then turning around to see nobody on the planks behind them. Trade caravans would stop near Chami to rest animals and repair gear, though some never made it out, vanishing on trails that later became Annapurna circuits, most avoided paths. This site wraps around one of the most dangerous mountain ranges in the world, where weather can shift from blue sky to whiteout blizzard faster than you can zip your jacket. In winter, bridges get coated in ice, making each crossing a slow shuffle, where a wrong step could send you through a gap in the planks. At Thorongla Pass, the air thins out until moving feels like sprinting upstairs, even though you are barely advancing. On one occasion, heavy snow trapped dozens of trekkers at high camp, and rescuers couldn't reach them as the trail vanished under waist-deep snow in under an hour. Some who tried to push through the whiteout never made it down, their bodies found days later, frozen in positions that looked like they were still walking. The people who survived here built stone shelters so small you have to crouch to enter. As you drop down from the high frozen zones, the path leads to the sacred fire and water at the temple of Muktinath, where many pause to give thanks for making it through alive. Here, a Buddhist monk opens the main shrine each morning to perform rituals, followed by a Hindu priest who takes over at night. Sacred shalagram stones pulled from the nearby river are placed at the deity's feet. Red vermilion powder and flowers are piled onto them by those who seek strength or protection. Chumik is the local name for the spouts, which translates to 100 waters, shaped like bullheads. Buddhists say the water flowing through them comes from sacred sources that exist beyond the physical world. Those who skip even one of them during their ritual bath will feel incomplete for the rest of the day, as if something invisible is still clinging. Moreover, 2 sacred ponds sit near the entrance, where people dunk themselves for a second round of purification before heading to lodges in Braa village. This residential space clings to a dusty hillside like it grew straight out of the rock, with grey stone houses stacked so tight that roofs turn into walkways between homes. Walking into the village feels like stepping into an old maze, because the alleys twist under overhanging rooms where wooden beams creak right above your head. People here learn to dry everything: meat, grain, herbs, on flat roofs, turning the houses into a hanging pantry where a single strong gust could steal a week of food. The first residents came from higher, harsher valleys and picked this slope on purpose, using the cliff as a giant windshield while they built outwards with stone. The monastery on the cliff above looks like it is nailed into it. From its terraces, you can stare straight at ice peaks that fill your whole view like a wall of white. All of this hangs above the Marsyangdi river, whose constant roar below sounds like distant traffic from another world that never reaches this stone hive. This water body starts as two cold streams high near Manang, then quickly turns into a violent white line that cuts through rock like it is sawing the mountain in half. In narrow canyon sections, the flow runs so close to the cliff that the road has been constructed straight into it, with sheer drop on one side and rock pressing on the other. Drivers steer past loose rock and blind bends, knowing that one mistake can send them straight off the edge. Suspension bridges cross the Marsyangdi at random points, hanging high above rapids that pound the gorge so hard that the sound shakes through chest and bones. In some lower sections, the current turns a cold, unreal blue from glacial silt, which makes it look calm even while it hides whirlpools and undercuts that flip boats. Old stories in the valley speak of this force as a strict guardian that rewards respect with safe passage but punishes arrogance with landslides and sudden floods. Far downstream, families in Gorapani village still talk about the same belief. The old name comes from the time when traders stopped here only to water tired horses, yet a full village grew from that simple stop, like an accident that refused to fade. The town sits on a high saddle, where fog rolls in so fast the whole village can vanish while standing in the middle of the main street. Roofs are stacked with wood and hay, not just for storage, but as a second shield against cold, turning each house into a bunker built from years of trial and error. Gurung and Marga families learned to thrive by farming steep terraces by day, then singing long story songs at night to keep fear of storms and landslides away. Wild yaks are still part of life here, hence villagers stay alert on quiet trails where a sudden snort or crunch of hooves can turn a calm walk into a careful retreat. These animals have massive frames with long hair that hangs like a moving curtain, turning the whole body into a walking blanket built for brutal cold. Horns sweep out from the sides of the head, then curve upward, sharp enough to flip a predator or smash packed snow when digging for hidden plants. Lungs and blood are tuned for thin air, with extra capacity that lets these animals move on ridges where many people faint or turn back. Mothers lead calves across narrow ledges with slow, sure steps, training them from the first walks to balance on paths where one slip means a long fall. Near Marfa village, herders keep a serious distance from truly wild yak, because one bad move near those horns can end a day much faster than any storm. The place sits in a wind tunnel where slate roofs, stone alleys and stacked wood feel like armour against gusts that slam through the valley every afternoon. Some alleys are so narrow that shoulders brush both sides at once, which forces strangers to slow down and move almost face to face through the village maze. Flat roofs double as drying yards covered in sliced apples and vegetables. Walking through the lanes feels like moving under a floating garden of food hanging above. Moreover, storm days turn the main lane into a rumour hub, where people shout news from doorways because dust and wind make normal street conversations impossible. Chitwan National Park once held whole Tharu villages inside its forest, until soldiers burned the homes and pushed the people out for wildlife to take over. Jeep tracks cut through tall elephant grass, where rhinos and tigers share hunting and grazing grounds, and each bend feels like crossing someone else's yard. Night here feels heavier than a normal night, with alarm calls from deer, monkeys and birds firing off like warning sirens from trees you cannot see. Tigers learn to charge elephants from the side instead of the front, using tall grass for cover to get close enough to knock riders from their seats. Rangers have tracked ones that started hunting only after sunset, changing their schedule to avoid patrols while still taking livestock from the edges of villages. Medicinal plants in this forest can treat fevers, stomach problems, and skin infections, turning the jungle into a living pharmacy for anyone who still knows which leaf to pick. Elephant grass grows taller than a person. The greater one-horned rhinoceros can stand just a few steps away and stay invisible until its heavy snort shakes the whole wall of green. These rhinos wear skin that folds into plates, which looks like natural armour built to take hits from branches, claws, and even other rhinos. The single horn grows from tough keratin, the same material as human nails, yet it grows strong enough to rip through thick grass walls in one push. Their sense of smell is sharp enough to catch human scent from far away, so a rhino often knows about a visitor long before any eyes make contact. The ears swivel like tiny radar dishes, turning toward even soft twig snaps, while the rhino's small eyes keep staring straight ahead. Mud baths double as armour upgrades because dried mud cakes onto their skin and blocks biting insects that would tear softer animals apart. Rhinos shape grasslands by trampling paths and cropping certain plants, creating open lanes that deer and other animals later use as safe travel routes. They can spin from calm to full charge in an instant, then stop short at the last second to test who is brave enough to stand still in front of it. A tension even Bengal tigers avoid. These tigers wear stripes that break up their body shape, letting them vanish into grass and shadow even when standing in plain sight. Their eyes reflect light in a way that makes them glow green in the dark, so one slow blink in a beam of torchlight can freeze a person on the spot. A Bengal tiger prefers to move along riverbanks and forest edges, stepping in soft ground that hides paw sounds better than dry leaf beds. The jaw muscles are strong enough to crush bone around the neck of large prey in one bite, ending the struggle before other animals even react. Tigers mark trees with claw slashes that sit higher than a person's head, leaving warning signs that most visitors never notice until someone points them out. In Chitwan's sal forest corridors, a tiger can track prey by reading smell on the wind and tiny sound changes, matching steps to those signals like a hunter solving a puzzle. The same grasslands that hide tigers also hold trails used by Asian elephants, so sometimes only broken stems and heavy footprints show that both giants walked through the same space at different hours. These elephants move almost silently for their size, placing each foot carefully so dry branches snap less than a human boot in the same spot. Their trunks work like extra arms with built-in fingers, strong enough to push over small trees, yet gentle enough to pick a single fruit from the ground. The huge ears act as cooling fans, flapping to push air over blood vessels just under the skin to drop body heat during the hottest hours. Family groups in Chitwan stick close together, using low rumbles that travel through the ground to stay in contact even when hidden by tall grass. Asian elephants in this park are listed as endangered, so each calf that survives its early years becomes a small victory for the whole forest. Nuwakot sits on a ridge where 3 river valleys meet, and the whole hill feels like a watchtower built by the earth itself. Tamang villages around the area learn to survive on steep slopes by carving tiny terraces into the hills, growing food on ledges that look too narrow to trust. Families here brewed strong grain alcohol as both medicine and currency, turning homemade drink into a survival tool that powered trades and rituals. After big quakes, people slept outside under plastic and tin, yet still cooked shared meals and rebuilt stone walls piece by piece without leaving their hills. Night roads in Nuwakot feel uneasy, with stories of a Bahuni girl spirit that appears near bends, which keeps many walkers off certain paths after dark. Additionally, one river stretch gained a reputation for pulling swimmers under, with drownings blamed on restless spirits that some believed got lost from Nuwakot Durbar. This 7-storey palace rises above the town like a stacked red brick tower, built to control both war and ceremony. Each floor once had a different role, from guard rooms and council halls below to prison cells in the higher levels that held defeated rulers. The top is the smallest yet most powerful spot, once used as a lookout and alarm post, where sirens or horns could call fighters from every side of the valley. Its labourers were forced up from other cities to build the 7-storey tower, which gives every brick a trace of sweat, anger, and unwilling work. Wooden windows are carved so finely that daylight enters in strips and patterns. Guards hear late-night footsteps on upper floors when no one is posted there, as if former prisoners still pace their invisible cells. The Nepal Himalayas rise like a wall that blocks the sky, yet tiny stone villages cling to their slopes, as if glued there by pure stubbornness. Native Highlanders trained their bodies over generations to walk steep trails, all day in thin air that leaves visitors gasping after a few steps. Whole communities survived by moving herds between summer and winter heights, chasing grass up and down the mountains like a living elevator. Shadowy figures have been seen crossing empty slopes at dusk, walking in places where no living person could stand without sinking into the snow. Sherpa climbers speak of hearing someone crunching snow right behind them on night climbs, then turning around to see only their own footprints. Some villages here shifted location entirely when water sources moved, picking up homes stone by stone and rebuilding closer to shrinking streams just to stay alive. One surviving residential space is the Dingbocha settlement. Families here grow barley and potatoes in soil that freezes hard, using low stone fences to trap even the weakest bit of warmth. Across the valley floor, long mani walls extend outward, each stone carved with mantras that stack into a silent chant you can feel under your fingers. Above the village, the stupa with the yellow roof stands watch, painted with eyes that face every direction at once like a mountain security system. Furthermore, many houses are built with livestock on the lower level and people above, turning body heat from animals into a heater that keeps rooms just warm enough to sleep. Even then, the wind carries ice crystals that sting exposed skin, yet residents walk barefaced. At times, some trekkers wake to the sound of the stupa bell, ringing in perfectly calm weather, then step outside to find no one near the rope, and the bell gently swinging on its own. Mount Everest stands so high that the top sits inside brutal winds that can rip gear off a climber in moments. Near the summit, the body slowly shuts down even when resting, so every step is taken while slowly dying. The top section is also called Rainbow Valley, or Danger Zone, because colourful jackets and gear still cling to frozen bodies that fell there and were never carried down. They are now trail markers with nicknames, turning human remains into direction points for later climbers. The ice and snow sometimes shift just enough to reveal a face, a hand or a boot from someone long gone, then cover it back up in the next storm. Some climbers describe hearing a strange hum in the upper camps, as if the mountain itself is vibrating under the weight of ice and wind. Snow can fall with such force up high that it erases even the Everest base camp in minutes, leaving only torn tent fabric and half-buried ropes behind. It is located on a moving glacier that groans and pops under the tents, as if the ground is breathing in slow, angry sighs. The entire village of tents stands on cracked ice and rocks that shift a little each day. At night, avalanches drop from nearby walls with a sound that feels like thunder right beside the ear. During the worst ones, tents were torn open so fast that some people woke up already buried in snow. Additionally, altitude sickness starts here for many, making walking clumsy and thinking slow. There are also lines on the ice where melting creates narrow channels. Staring into them too long feels like staring into an open eye. Bungamati courtyards once sat beside a cremation ground with wood, gods and gossip, all sharing the same square of sunlight. The main pagoda for Muktinath rises from one courtyard like a brick mountain, its base ringed with worn stone figures. Some of them have teeth bared and eyes wide, made that way to scare off anything that might crawl in when the deity's chariot is away. Old families farm and carve temple pieces for living, turning courtyard homes into places where art literally pays for food. They kept going even after the big earthquake cracked walls and dropped roofs, setting up temporary shrines right beside fallen bricks instead of abandoning the square. Chandragiri Hills feels like a balcony above the world, with a temple, fort ruins, and a whole tiny hilltop town clinging to one long ridge. Past villagers say the first homes on this ridge were built as storm refuges, then slowly turned into full houses when people realised life up here kept them above floods and dust. It once marked a battle line where a king lost control of a whole valley in a single decision made on this ridge. Landslides have wiped out parts of the access road in past monsoon seasons, briefly cutting the hilltop off from the city like a floating island. Night guards on the summit often hear marching rhythms on the closed paths after hours, even when security cameras showed empty walkways. Wild animals also move through those lower slopes, and early workers see glowing eyes watching them from tree lines during night shifts, the culprit being the steppe eagle. It has a heavy dark brown body with a thick neck and a head that looks slightly too small, which gives its glare an even sharper edge. Its wings are long and broad, built to lock into one position and glide for huge distances with almost no effort. A pale patch on the back of its neck stands out like a faded badge against the darker feathers. The legs are fully feathered down to huge talons, turning each foot into a padded but deadly clamp for grabbing prey. This eagle often hunts low over the ground, then suddenly drops onto prey or even chases it on foot with an odd shambling run. Gokyo Valley is a crack in the mountains, where a chain of dark rock, blue lakes and thin air dares you to keep walking higher. The water bodies are treated as sacred. Even rinsing clothes in them is taboo, and anyone who sneaks a wash there is said to invite storms on the trail. Some also say unseen water spirits guard Gokyo lakes, which is why stones, plants, and even small pebbles are left untouched on the shoreline. Stories around the valley speak of mirror nights, when the waters go perfectly still, and anyone staring too long at their own reflection starts seeing someone else's face instead. Lone trekkers often turn back from halfway up, after hearing their own name shouted from just ahead, even though no one else was on the route that morning. High above the valley, flashes of bright colour shoot low across the slopes, which usually means a Himalayan monal has just exploded out of the scrub. The feathers look wet and glossy, but the shine comes from microscopic layers in the feather surface that bend light into different colours, like a natural prism. The species stays wary and bolts at the smallest sound, which makes a close look in places like Gokyo Valley feel rare enough to count as its own small trophy. Rara Lake is a high, remote blue lake, ringed by dark forest and cliffs, where quiet water holds more ghost stories than most towns. A demon allegedly once lived here and came out at night to terrorise nearby villages until a warrior forced it back into the water for good. Another tale says a girl drowned while searching for a lost sheep, and her spirit still walks the misty shore on moonlit nights. On windless days, the lake surface goes mirror flat, yet some fish suddenly leap in perfect lines, like something below is herding them. Furthermore, the forest around Rara hid rebels and outlaws in the past, turning the calm shoreline into a quiet hideout for people on the run. Residents also once used the lake as a secret meeting place, crossing by wooden boat in the dark to trade goods away from tax collectors, then retreat later to Murma village. This site hangs on a steep mountainside, with whitewashed houses packed tight like they are holding each other up. In the past, families here survived long winters by drying barley and maize on flat roofs, stacking food so high the houses looked armoured in grain. The forest around the village hides shy red pandas in the mossy trees, playfully creating rustles in the branches. It has a round face with white markings and dark tear lines from eyes to mouth, which gives a permanent wide-eyed, almost masked expression. Its long, bushy ringed tail works like a balance pole on branches and doubles as a fuzzy wrap over the body during cold resting times. A unique extra thumb made from a wrist bone lets the red panda pinch bamboo stems and cling tightly to narrow tree limbs. Flexible ankles allow it to climb down tree trunks head first, which is a rare skill among tree-living mammals. Semi-retractable claws and thick fur on the soles give a strong grip on wet, mossy bark while still keeping the feet warm. Life stays mostly in trees, with long periods of napping on branches between slow walks to chew bamboo, fruit and small snacks. Virendra is in a wide, bowl-shaped valley, and from the middle of town, the hills feel like a ring of walls holding the whole place in. Families who arrived with nothing used the riverbanks as temporary camps, then slowly moved uphill as they traded labour for land and turned a floodplain into a busy basin town. The valley once held an airstrip-like flat plot that became badly encroached, and many blame that grab of open land for weird planning problems that still haunt the city layout. Long-time residents say the city grew fastest right after a series of disasters in nearby hills, as if Birendra fed on other places' bad luck to get stronger. The clock tower rises over the crossroads like a giant metronome, and at night its lit faces float in the dark sky like four pale eyes, watching every direction at once. During power cuts, it keeps ticking while the rest of the square goes black, which makes the tower feel more alive than the buildings around it. Tucked inside this busy valley life, the Doti Baji temple waits with a much older and stranger story of protection and fear. Its story is tied to the Raji community, who once came here almost in secret to ask for safety before stepping into forests full of wild animals and unknown threats. Many visitors follow a quiet rule to never step on the threshold stone, only over it, because those who stamped on it in anger ended up with sudden misfortune soon after. During major festivals, the courtyard packs so tightly that breathing becomes work, yet people stay pressed to the walls rather than risk turning their back on the main shrine door. Vows here are made in desperation, which came true in harsh ways, like lost things returned only after heavy personal cost, later linking such outcomes to Kakrabihar ruins. Walking into the site feels like stepping onto a frozen construction site, with carved stones scattered as if builders suddenly dropped everything and never came back. The layout shows both Buddhist figures and Hindu deities carved on the fallen blocks, as if two belief systems once shared one crowded sacred platform. Old stories say a proud ruler tried to raise a multi-storey palace, or vihara, here in a single night to win a challenge, then wrecked his own work in rage when dawn exposed the failure. Another tale links the ruins to the Pandava princes and a palace built to burn them alive, with the shattered stones seen as the scar of that betrayal plot. Today, people hear low murmurs when standing alone among the stones, yet no other person stands close enough to explain the sound. In Tansen, traders once used to move salt and grain during wars, slipping through back courts while gunfire sounded from hill forts above. During battles, cannon smoke covered the whole bazaar, and many fighters never made it out of those narrow steps, their bodies buried under collapsed houses. Musicians marched with war bands, playing drums so loud that enemies panicked, which turned music into a weapon instead of just a celebration tool. The town also once caught fire during unrest, and families saved their carved doors before anything else, dragging them through the streets like rescued family members. Metal workers here melted broken guns and cannon parts into household tools, turning weapons into cooking pots and bells. During blockades, people turned terraced fields into secret food stores, hiding grain under layers of soil so raiders would only see empty land. In the middle of this, Rana Ujeshwari Bhagwati temple stands as the place where fighters promised victory in return for anything, even their own peace. This structure honours a fierce goddess who was once called on before battles, with warriors visiting here to ask for strength before marching out. In past wars, fighters swore oaths at this temple that desertion would bring ruin, and some who broke those oaths later died in freak accidents back home. The highest point of the roof carries a golden finial shaped like a spear tip, like a lightning rod aimed straight at the sky for calling storms. Its golden door feels heavy even before touching it, with metal panels so packed with carvings that every inch seems to hide a different face or claw. If someone lies while ringing the outer bells and ascending the steps, the sound changes to a dull, flat tone that only that person can hear, even if they run in fright around Kali Gandaki. This site's riverbed is famous for black shalagram stones, which carry spiral fossils that are taken as living forms of Vishnu, trapped in rock. Strong winds race through the upper gorge, lifting sand that stings exposed skin and feels like being hit with tiny needles. Rituals for the departed use this river's water because it is said to carry prayers faster. It passes near Siddha Baba Temple, a place drivers mention in stories about narrow escapes, sudden stops, and prayers made in pure panic. This structure is above a narrow highway, with trucks and buses passing just meters from the shrine to a wandering saint who once meditated here. The rock face above the temple sheds stones even in the dry season. Every parked jeep feels like it is waiting in a firing line. Drivers still stop to honk or bow toward the shrine, even after seeing smashed vehicles below, as if skipping that moment would tempt the cliff to move again. On the temple roof, a black drongo sometimes perches on the power line, scanning the road as if in charge of who may pass and who may not. It is a sleek, dark bird with a sharply forked tail that looks like someone cut a wedge out of it. Its eyes sit forward on a slightly heavy head, giving a locked-on stare that never seems to relax when it watches other birds. This bird copies alarm calls of many species with scary accuracy, then uses those fake alarms to scare others away and steal their food. The forked tail flicks and twitches constantly while it waits on a branch or wire, like a warning flag that something fast is about to happen. It hunts from exposed perches, over fields or ponds, dropping in sudden straight dives on insects as if fired from a tiny black catapult. Despite its small size, it attacks hawks and crows in midair, ramming and chasing them until they leave its nesting area. This fearless bird also watches grazing animals from nearby trees, snatching insects kicked up by hooves, a behaviour easy to spot near old palaces like Rani Mahal by the river. Rani Mahal stands alone on a rocky bank above the Gandaki river, a pale riverside palace built as a love monument for a queen whose body was burned nearby. The long stone steps from the river up to the palace pass old cremation platforms where bodies once burned day and night, turning this grand home into a neighbour of the departed. After its builder fled the country, the palace sat empty for decades, its windows broken and rooms open to bats, thieves and wandering animals. The forest above the palace is still called Rani Ban, a place where passers have heard a woman sobbing near a huge tree even in the middle of the day. After a skull was dug up near the river, witnesses described 4 women setting themselves on fire and dancing by the water, a story often retold when passing through Ranigat. Kathmandu city rests in a bowl of hills where fog, dust, incense and traffic fuse into one heavy air that feels like breathing history and exhaust at the same time. Earthquakes have cracked palaces, dropped whole towers, and turned busy streets into rubble in minutes, yet the place keeps patching itself together like a stitched-up ghost. Festivals shut entire squares as masked dancers swing swords and whips before shrines where blood once flowed on the stones. Royal courtyards were planned with concealed feud tales behind lattice windows, as rivalries unfolded through poison cups rather than battlefields. Nighttime drivers often see sudden figures crossing the ring road, then vanishing before they reach the opposite sidewalk. At the centre of this maze is Kathmandu Durbar Square, a tight cluster of palaces, shrines, and the home of a living goddess. The complex kept power close by building yards within yards, forcing any intruder to pass layers of gates to reach the throne room. A living goddess resides in the Kumari Gar, a child chosen by strict signs and kept inside an etched brick house where even her footsteps are treated like sacred objects. Once she takes the throne, her bare feet are not allowed to touch ground beyond the plaza until her divine role ends. During festival days, her chariot lurches through the plaza, pulled by men who know a wrong turn, in tight lanes could be read as anger from the goddess. Some palace windows are etched with thousands of tiny holes, built to let rulers watch crowds unseen, turning the area into a stage observed by concealed eyes. Masks used in age-old dances are stored in unlit rooms off the yards, and workers whisper about hearing drums from inside when no festival is underway. Foreign envoys once waited inside enclosures for hours, observed from lattice windows, while rulers decided whether to welcome or reject them. That patch of hill in the middle is Swayambhu Hill, watching from above like the valley's oldest witness. It is topped with shrines and trees that catch the first and last light each day. Monasteries also cling to the hillside, their walls painted with deities holding skull cups and weapons meant to scare away forces that never show their faces. At the very crown of this hill, Swayambhunath Stupa can be seen, whose painted eyes survey all these scenes with a calm that can feel either comforting or unsettling. It is a white dome crowned with a golden spire, staring out across the entire valley. It represents a cosmic mound, built as a solid mass where relics and offerings are sealed inside forever. Swayambhunath Stupa once drew rulers who came barefoot at night to circle it in secret, hoping to gain power over rivals without anyone seeing the ritual. Monks once tracked astrological events from this hilltop, using the stupa as a fixed point to read sky shifts and omens of war or famine from star alignments above its spire. In past invasions, defenders dragged sacred images up to the hill and hid them inside chambers around the stupa, leading enemy soldiers to believe the gods had vanished. Prayer flags, faded to near grey, still hang alongside new ones, weaving a timeline of hopes that stretches back farther than any visitor can trace. Around the base and on the stairs, rhesus macaques prowl, raid offerings, and watch visitors with sharp eyes, turning this holy site into their own rough kingdom. They have pinkish faces, sharp canines, and strong hands that grip railings, temple edges, and even loose clothing with ease. These monkeys study human patterns with uncanny skill, sometimes waiting near snack stalls, timing raids for the precise moment a hand reaches for a wallet. Troops often sprawl across steppes in the sun, appearing lazy, yet spring into action when food appears, as if the entire group shares one signal. Teeth baring can signal threat or a twisted grin, and a single wrong look from a person can provoke a charge from an offended monkey. Mothers carry babies clinging to their bellies while climbing temple roofs, forming moving chains of fur, fingers, and tails along stupa edges. Their calls ring across the hill at dawn, mingling with bells and horns into a wild chorus that feels half temple, half jungle. It is a Shiva complex on a riverbank where stone shrines, burning pyres, and wandering sadhus move through its premises. On the cremation ghats, bodies burn in the open while monkeys perch on nearby rooftops, watching every step of the ritual in eerie silence. Funeral smoke drifts straight into temple courtyards, letting the scent of death mingle with incense and ringing bells during worship. Some people near the ghats collapse suddenly from emotion or shock, then awaken claiming to have seen shadowy forms moving through the smoke. A famous myth says Shiva fled here, disguised as a one-horned stag, and when other gods snapped off the horn, it turned into the original Pashupati linga that later vanished in the soil. The missing horn linga was found after a cow poured milk on the ground, leading people to dig and uncover a glowing shrine object believed to be within Patan Durbar Square. It is a royal palace complex with stone lions guarding stairways, with features worn smooth by hands that brushed them for luck before entering temples. Some columns show visages with fangs and bulging eyes, meant to scare off evil, yet just as likely to unsettle anyone who stares back too long. The area began as a fort, and the square under the temples once held walls, guards and weapons instead of markets and pilgrims. Powerful merchant families here once had enough money to swap out kings. The nearby bathing tanks once held water reserved for kings and priests, with strict rules that kept common people away from the steppes. During droughts, people sneaked close to those tanks at night, risking punishment just to scoop a few drops from sacred water. The palace complex became so neglected that it landed on a global danger list, marked as a royal ghost of crumbling wood and cracked brick, before restoration pulled it back. Krishna Mandir Temple rises in Patan as a towering stone shrine built with stacked tiers and arches that resemble a chiselled mountain. Each pillar along the lower level holds scenes from earlier tales cut straight into the rock, letting the surfaces read like frozen comic strips of battles and miracles. Some visitors claim that figures on outer facades shift their expression across changing weather, smiling during clear days, yet turning harsher in the rain. Rani Pakari is a large man-made pond in the city centre, with an island temple in the middle, reached by a single stone causeway. The pond was built as an act of grief by a king for his queen, turning personal loss into a piece of water that still pulls crowds during certain festivals. The water level once stayed off limits to most people, locked behind gates, as the basin felt more like a giant private shrine than a public pool. During a special festival, the gates open for a short time, allowing people to walk onto the causeway and circle the island like a slow-moving river of bodies. The temple in the middle holds deities linked to protection from snakes and death, giving the whole pond a quiet, watchful mood after dark. City legends speak of people who tried to swim in the water and were dragged under by weeds and mud, their bodies found days later near the steps. Renovation work once exposed aged bricks and foundations along the pond edges, revealing structures beneath the waterline, predating the Bungamati stupa. It is a massive white dome with a golden tower on top, painted with giant eyes that stare out over a ring of prayer wheels and shops. Pilgrims would circle the stupa clockwise in endless loops, spinning countless prayer wheels until their hands ached. A king was tricked into cutting off his father's head to end a drought, then had to build Bungamati, where a released hen landed to repay the act. Additionally, early texts say prayers made here cannot fail, which is why people come to dump impossible wishes into this one spot, like a cosmic last resort machine. The first version of the stupa was wrecked by invaders, leaving a shattered dome that had to be raised again from rubble, like a decapitated monument given a new head. Ritual texts also call Bungamati a wish-granting jewel, promising that anyone who passes while remembering it will wake up in a lotus in a pure realm. Apart from loyal believers, birds like the common terns also frequent the stupa. They are slim, sharp-winged seabirds with black caps on their heads and pointed red bills built for fast dives. These birds hover above water, then drop in clean plunges to grab fish with a speed that makes their bodies look like arrows. Their wings are long and narrow, which allows sudden, tight turns in the air when chasing prey or dodging gusts. Their plumage shifts between cleaner grey and white during different seasons, helping the birds merge with water and sky. Furthermore, common terns often stand on rocks or posts in groups, facing into the wind like rows of tiny weather vanes. Lumbini is a sacred garden town where a single marker stone, quiet ponds, and a long stone walkway point to the exact spot linked to the start of one world-changing life. Standing by the marker stone inside its Maya Devi temple feels strange because the glass floor reveals ruins below, while chanting fills the hall above. The eternal peace flame burns at one end of the garden, with fuel kept hidden from casual view, which makes the steady fire appear almost sourceless. The sacred pond beside the temple reflects even tiny ripples, as if every movement on that water is being noticed. Monasteries from many countries occupy one zone, each with its own style, which makes walking that path feel like jumping between worlds in a few steps. At the far edge of the complex, the White World Peace Pagoda rises above the trees like a final checkpoint for anyone still carrying noise inside. This white stupa was built by Japanese Buddhists, standing alone on a mound. Climbing the long stairway gives the feeling of walking away from normal ground into a zone where voices drop. The circular path around the structure is meant to be walked in one direction only, and stepping the wrong way feels oddly wrong, even without any sign nearby. Construction once faced pushback and delays, yet the builders kept returning, patching cracks and repainting the dome until it became one of the brightest points in the flat park. Pokhara is a lakeside city where trading families used both lake and mountain routes to move goods, building a town that survived climate swings by never relying on one road. A massive flash flood once roared down its gorge, wiping out markets and hot spring resorts in minutes, while people ran from what first sounded like a distant wind. Geologists explain that the valley rests on thick debris from huge landslides off the Annapurna range, meaning the solid floor is actually a giant dump of broken mountain. In one flood event, a wall of mud and boulders taller than buildings charged down the valley, leaving layers of rock so deep that new houses now rise on top of buried fields. Researchers warn that the same underground systems that formed its lakes came from past mega-floods and mountain collapses, indicating the calm waters are leftover scars. Thunderstorms also roll in fast from behind the peaks, dropping lightning strikes close enough to the water for people on boats to feel hairs stand up. Tal Barahi Temple is a small two-storey pagoda on an island in the middle of the lake, reached only by wooden or metal boats. Stepping off the boat feels like entering a floating fort, with stone steps rising straight out of the water toward the compact shrine. The temple honours Barahi, a boar-headed goddess who is one fierce form of Durga, the protector deity who fought demons with her tusks rather than swords. After defeating evil forces in battle, she visited the Pokhara Valley, found it beautiful, and chose to remain, which is why the island became her permanent home. The original legend says a busy city once existed where Fewer Lake is now, full of people who ignored a beggar woman knocking on every door asking for food. That woman was actually the goddess in disguise, testing the hearts of the city by pretending to be powerless and starving. Gupteshwar Mahadev Cave is an interesting, narrow shrine near Pokhara, where a Shiva lingam rests in a chamber formed by water and time. Access begins with a spiral staircase that twists downward, like a giant corkscrew embedded into the hillside. The walls in the deeper section reveal layers of colour from mineral deposits, painting the rock in shades that shift as light reflects off wet surfaces. When the first explorers stepped inside, they found statues of Shiva, Parvati, and other deities left untouched. They are now positioned outside for public viewing. A concrete bridge leading to the entrance was destroyed by a landslide, trapping devotees on the wrong side until workers built an emergency iron staircase. Begnas Lake is a quieter freshwater lake east of Pokhara, ringed by farms and forested slopes. It exists because a massive rock slide from Annapurna foredammed a side river, turning a valley into a permanent water trap. Swimmers often feel sudden cold spots in certain sections of the lake, as if passing through invisible walls of icy water that shouldn't exist. Today, locals built terraced fields down toward the waterline, using lake moisture and seasonal rains to grow crops in layers like giant green stairs. Among the birds here, the pheasant-tailed jacana moves lightly across floating vegetation, like walking on stitched pieces of the lake itself. It is a water bird with a slim body, sharp face, and long toes that spread weight across floating leaves. Its toes and claws are extremely long and thin, which lets each foot stand on soft lily pads without breaking through the surface. In breeding season, the bird grows very long tail feathers that trail behind like streamers when it flies low over the water. Plumage shifts to show a rich white head and neck contrasting with darker wings, turning the bird into a moving flag above the pads. It feeds by carefully picking insects and seeds from the top of floating plants, moving with slow, precise steps that barely ripple the water. These birds can be seen on Fewer Lake too, stitching paths across plant mats that look solid only under their special feet. This popular body of water is the main lake of Pokhara, once holding simple farm plots and fishing spots before growing into a dense strip of hotels, bars and shops. The water level is partly controlled by a dam, which means human choices upstream can change where the shore begins. Ducks and other water birds share space with paddleboards and kayaks, weaving between human craft with little fear. In older stories, the lake is linked with protective deities and powerful rituals, which still draw pilgrims to shrines along its edge, even as tourists come mainly for views. In one tragic accident, a boat carrying people collecting fodder capsized, drowning everyone aboard in water that turned calm again minutes later. Even security personnel trained for water rescue have drowned in the lake during operations, with their bodies found days later in spots far from where they went under. Janakpur is a sacred city built around ponds and temples, believed to be the birthplace of Sita, where myth and daily life merge into one crowded devotional space. A cigarette factory ran the place like a second heartbeat. Its siren woke people at dawn and signalled bedtime, replacing temple bells for generations. Meanwhile, the railway once linked the city to the border on narrow-gauge tracks but shut down, leaving rusted engines on bricks and wheels overgrown with grass. During its operation, armed dacoits often boarded trains near the border, robbing passengers at gunpoint before leaping off and vanishing. The railway ran for 56 years with no foreign aid, maintained by local workers who had no training, promotions, or reviews, yet kept it running. At the centre of this whole web of ponds, smoke and sound is the Janaki temple, where the stories feel loudest, even when the halls go quiet. This palace complex looks like a white storybook fortress with arches and courtyards. It is said the palace was revealed in a dream, then later matched almost exactly in real stone, which gives the whole structure a copied vision feel. People bring wedding dresses, red powder and garlands, dedicating them to Sita, hoping for luck in marriages that have not yet begun. On major marriage festivals, the palace fills with couples renewing vows, yet older residents recall nights when halls remained crowded after lights went out. During political unrest, processions still pass through the gates, mixing fear and devotion, while armed forces watched from beyond. Sinja Kingdom Ruins is located in a lonely valley with broken palaces and shrines that once ran a powerful hill kingdom, now left mostly to grass and wind. It is where early forms of the Nepali language were inscribed, and the ruins carry some of the first written words that influenced daily speech. After the collapse, the once unified kingdom fragmented into 22 rival states, turning former allies into enemies overnight. A ring of huge stone columns circles part of the ruins, like a frozen stone army, guarding a town that no longer exists. Nepalgunj is a flat frontier city that functions as a trade hub, pulling in people from many directions who learn to share streets, water, and work even through droughts and conflict. The heat here can feel punishing, which led residents to turn to evening life, filling lanes after dark when the air finally loosens its grip. It has experienced fatal epidemics, with stories of entire neighbourhoods going quiet, except for the sound of carts carrying bodies to cremation grounds. During one curfew period, security forces patrolled streets that stayed locked down for days, trapping families inside homes without fresh supplies. The city's maze of alleyways once made it easy for smugglers to vanish, bringing both illegal trade and sudden bursts of wealth to certain families. Ghost stories in the region include tales of Dargin, a female spirit who appears on abandoned roads asking for help, before vanishing into cold gusts of air. Within this chaos stands Bageshwari Temple, where the energy shifts suddenly from market noise to barefoot seriousness. It is the most feared and respected shrine in Nepalgunj, known especially for its small but intense Bhairav temple with a real human skull idol. It is where the goddess Sati's tongue is believed to have fallen, creating a hole in the earth that could not support its sacred weight. The temple was established by a wandering Siddhi yogi who discovered the site through visions, then built the first shrine over the pit. Some devotees walk barefoot over dried blood as a test of courage, viewing any flinch as a sign of weak faith. Some thieves ran from the temple grounds only to collapse before reaching the main gate. From this charged temple, roads stretch outward toward the wild spaces of Bardia National Park, where instead of idols, fear comes from claws and teeth. It is a huge wild area of forest and river where animals rule the timetable, not people. Residents near the park shifted their crops and fences again and again to survive regular raids by elephants, rhinos, and other wildlife. Tigers here have pulled people from boats and from the edges of fields, making every step near tall grass feel like a gamble. Night in Bardia is also almost too loud, with insects and unseen creatures, making it hard to sleep while imagining eyes in the dark. The park once saw poaching so intense that anti-poaching units treated each duty day like a military mission. The people, too focused on the task and on staying safe, only spotted deer that would startle themselves and dart off to the grasses, which could distract them. They have sleek brown coats covered in white spots that work like natural camouflage in dappled forest light. Their ears twitch constantly, picking up tiny sounds that warn them of predators long before a human could hear anything. The males grow antlers that branch outward, which they use to fight for space and for access to groups of females. These deer often graze in the early morning when the grass is moist and predators are less active. Their legs are thin but powerful, built to sprint in sudden bursts and zigzag through trees. Young deer stay hidden in tall grass with almost no movement, depending on their spots to break up their outline. Spotted deer often share grasslands and river edges with the heavier, horned shapes of wild water buffaloes. They have a massive, blocky body with a low, drooping belly and a long ridge over the shoulders that makes the back look like a slow-moving hill. Horns sweep out and back in wide scimitar curves, reaching lengths that beat every other cattle species on the planet. Skin is dark grey to black with very sparse hair, so mud becomes a second skin that cools the body and blocks biting insects. Hooves spread wide like paddles, which stops the legs from sinking when the animal stands chest deep in swamp water. Wild water buffalo keep most of the day close to rivers and marshes, resting in water with only the nose, eyes and horn tips showing above the surface. Compared with domestic water buffalo, wild ones are bulkier, more muscular and far less tolerant of anything that enters their space. Dharan grew from a former army town after a big camp opened, with neighbourhoods forming where families learned to live with marching drills shaking their walls. People from hill communities came down to the town to trade and work, slowly turning it into a crossroads where multiple languages collide in a single tea shop. The city stands at the spot where tears of Lord Shiva supposedly fell and turned into Rudraksha beads, making the ground itself sacred according to earlier texts. Multiple college campuses have grown in Dharan, turning the town into a student hub where hostel blocks and libraries pack tightly around earlier temples. Meanwhile, the Dunghanas area near campus zones grew rapidly, with boarding houses stacked so close that cooking smoke from one window drifts straight into another. From Dharan's busy streets, the road twists up toward the quieter slopes of Dantakali Temple. The structure is perched on a steep hill above, reached by a staircase that leaves legs burning before even arriving at the first shrine. This temple honours a goddess whose teeth are said to have dropped here, which gives the place a sharp, almost biting energy even in clear daylight. At the entrance, a massive tree stands covered in many red cloth strips tied by people making wishes, turning the trunk into a column of fluttering prayers. Each red cloth represents a request or a secret promise, and over time, the tree looks less like wood and more like a creature wrapped in blood-coloured bandages. Metal railings line the climb, and during festivals they vibrate from the weight of thousands of hands pulling upward at the same time. Sometimes a funky bird also adds its mass, the great hornbill. It is a huge forest bird with a massive yellow casque on its beak that looks like a built-in helmet. Its beating wings make a loud whooshing sound that can be heard long before the bird flies into view. The casque on its head amplifies calls across long distances, turning simple sounds into echoing honks over the canopy. During nesting, the female is sealed inside a tree hole with mud and droppings while the male passes food through a narrow slit for weeks. The bird spends long periods preening its feathers with oily secretions from a gland near its tail, giving its plumage a water-resistant shine. It uses its huge beak like chopsticks to pluck fruits and toss them into the air before swallowing them whole. The great hornbill sometimes appears carved on temple struts or painted near Pindeshwar temple. It is seen in Dharan as a Shiva shrine where the air smells of wet stone and burnt offerings. The red figure inside is coated so thick with vermilion powder that its original stone surface has disappeared under layers of offerings built up over time. Moreover, the complex has multiple shrines tucked into corners, each with its own bell, creating a layered curtain of clangs and murmurs. During major fasting rituals, people walk barefoot over rough stone, some carrying water pots on their heads, as if balancing their promises. Some crawl the stairway on their knees as penance, leaving blood trails that dry on the stone steps, treating it like ascending Bedatar Hill Station. This place is a ridge viewpoint near the eastern hills, where weather shifts rapidly, and fog can engulf the entire town in minutes. In one flood season, over 50 people perished in nearby districts when rain triggered cascades of mud, moving faster than anyone could escape. Moreover, the station occupies a spot where cell towers and radio transmitters cluster, allowing electronic signals to pulse through the mist like invisible threads. Bhaktapur is a brick kingdom where narrow alleys, detailed windows and stone courtyards follow layouts drawn centuries ago by architects who combined religion with geometry. In the winter invasion of 1349, armies from Bengal ransacked the city for 7 straight days, burning temples until survivors fled into the mountains. After that destruction, the entire city was rebuilt from scratch, using texts on architecture, turning Bhaktapur into a planned fortress disguised as a temple town. Eight city gates once matched shrines to 8 mother goddesses, creating a defensive ring where war strategy and worship merged into one system. A ruler once threatened to cancel the annual Biska Jatra festival to force the city's surrender, the first time a celebration was used as a weapon at Bhaktapur Durbar Square. It is a royal palace complex where Malla kings once ruled from ornate wooden windows and stone courtyards packed with statues and shrines. Rival kings fought over it, and entire temples were sometimes built to prove that one ruler outshone another in devotion and money. During Biscuit Jatra, a massive pole is raised and then violently torn down to mark the defeat of serpent demons said to harm bridegrooms on wedding nights. Centuries-old wooden struts and windows that survived wars and fires were crushed in seconds, proving that even sacred craftsmanship has limits against earthquakes. Furthermore, an octagonal temple was once built to block harmful energy radiating from a lingam shrine that pointed toward the king's palace as a spiritual weapon. Only the head of Bhairava is worshipped there, because the god was decapitated during a festival to prevent him from leaving the city. Nyatapola Temple is a 5-tiered pagoda in Bhaktapur, built for a goddess whose full form is considered too powerful for normal eyes. Some priests say she cannot bear to be disturbed, which is why her temple refuses to collapse, even when the city shakes. At night, the stone guardians on the stairs look almost alive in torchlight, as if ready to step down if anyone unworthy climbs too high. There were once drunk men who mocked the goddess at the base of the stairs and later met with sudden accidents in the same square. Solukhumbu region feels like a giant stone maze built for spirits first and people second. High valleys here are treated as holy grounds where every ridge has a story of something unseen watching the trails. Some rumours say Yeti footprints in fresh snow have been found near lonely herder huts, with strides too long for a person and too straight for a wandering animal. Namche began as a trading pit, where yak caravans from the highlands met grain traders from lower valleys, forming a noisy barter ring before trekkers arrived. Stone houses in here rise like steps on the slope, with flat roofs that double as drying racks for potatoes, grain, and clothes flung out after snow days. Early traders sometimes vanished on the way in, yet their loaded yaks staggered into the village alone days later. In early mountaineering days, climbers with homemade gear staggered into Namche half frozen, and some never went past the lodges. Before rescue helicopters, injured climbers were carried down on makeshift stretchers, and the sight of those silent processions burned into village memory. Some climbers who pushed higher despite chest pains later perished in thin air, and their last healthy days had been spent eating cake in bakeries like nothing was wrong. Every stone path and mani wall in this bazaar rests layered over those trading deals, storms, vanishings, and close calls that mark the Khumbu Valley. Old traders once walked here with salt on their backs, stepping around crevasses in thin sandals, treating sheer drop-offs like normal village alleys. Communities adapted by building homes with thick stone walls and raised sleeping platforms that stay dry even when snowmelt floods the ground floors. In the evenings, the valley feels quiet, that even the hum of distant avalanches sounds like whispering from far up the walls. Cliffs also hold hungry spots where they fall more often, as if the slopes keep asking for new offerings. High on a forested ridge, prayer flags point toward Tengboche Monastery. It is on a wide saddle above Khumbu, with peaks crowding in from all sides like silent stone guardians around its red and white walls. The main gateway is painted with fierce protector faces, and passing beneath them feels like stepping through a final checkpoint into mountain space. They are deities with bulging eyes and fangs, designed to scare away evil spirits before they cross the threshold. The monastery's main courtyard is open to the sky, and during storms, rain floods the stones, while monks keep praying without stopping or moving. Fire destroyed earlier structures in the past, leaving only blackened ground, where monks later rebuilt prayer halls on the same scars. Some expedition teams received blessings here, then lost members on the mountain days later, leaving their donated gear behind like ghost offerings. A Yeti sighting near Tengboch is treated as a warning of incoming storms or avalanches, not just a strange encounter. Nearby Junbesi is a river valley village along an old trail. It once lay on a main trade path, and stories still circle about porters who walked out in storms and were later found frozen standing up, ropes still in their hands. Routes above the village passed under cliffs where rockfall sometimes wiped out full mule caravans, leaving bells and packs buried under fresh debris. Junbesi Monastery kept gold and relics hidden in wall cavities during raids, and later workers opened some sections to find entire chambers bricked up with untouched offerings inside. For a long time, it also stored handwritten texts on loose leaves, but one roof leak destroyed a whole stack in a single night of rain. Ilam tea highlands spread across rolling hills, where every slope seems organised into neat green lines of tea bushes. Tasters here can tell which hillside a batch came from just by smell, treating each slope like a separate world. The first tea estates turned thick forest into terraces, creating a new way of life built around plucking leaves at the crack of day. Among its hunters is the golden jackal, moving quietly along the borders of the tea, watching the fields like a patient shadow. Its fur shifts colour with the seasons, growing paler in dry months and darker when plants thicken, helping it disappear into grass and scrub. A golden jackal can switch diets easily, hunting small animals one night and raiding fruit or garbage the next without trouble. Jackal pairs sometimes sing in duet-style howls, creating eerie, overlapping calls that sound much closer than they really are. Their hearing is so sharp that even a tiny rustle in dry leaves can trigger a sudden pounce from stillness. The tail lifts slightly when the animal is alert, acting like a small flag that signals mood to nearby jackals. Those watchful eyes scan the dark edges of the tea hills in the same way porcupine eyes scan for danger before every slow step. Its body is packed with sharp quills that are actually modified hairs hardened with keratin. The quills are loosely attached and can detach into an attacker's skin when contact happens. Muscles at the base of the quills can lift them, turning a round body into a spiky ball that looks much larger. Porcupines use long whiskers to feel their way through dark burrows and dense plants, mapping space before stepping forward. Strong front teeth never stop growing and must be worn down by constant gnawing on wood and bark. Dolpa region is a high remote area of canyons, bare ridges and blue lakes tucked between long walls of rock. Traders used to walk cliff paths at night to avoid heat and patrols, guided only by starlight and the sound of rivers far below. Some salt caravans never reached their destination, leaving packs and bones found years later on side ridges far from the main trail. Additionally, a powerful healer was said to move between villages unseen during epidemics, arriving just before the first fevers started. Others believed that it stopped at Shegompa, a monastery so remote that reaching it feels like travelling. This building is pressed against bare rock, where the air feels thin and every sound gets swallowed by the valley. The main temple hall holds statues, with faces worn so that expressions look different each time the butter lamps flicker. Snow sometimes blocks every track to the outside world, leaving the monastery cut off for days with only stored butter, grain and river ice to live on. From the Upper Kora Trail, the path points toward Ringmo village, where another strange set of waters and rituals waits. It perches on a cliff above a lake, with tight stone houses that feel glued to the rock to keep them from sliding off. Wooden roofs hold Tansmasken that stare down at the lanes, their frozen faces meant to scare anything that moves in the night. In the inner end courtyard, prayer poles rattle in the wind, hard enough that the sound feels like someone knocking from under the stone floor. High above Ringmo village, silent snow leopards move like ghosts along the ridges, watching the settlement and leaving no trace. It can melt into bare rock and snow so perfectly that even a blinking eye vanishes into the pattern of its own fur. The tail is so thick and heavy that it works like a blanket when wrapped around the face during rest. Paws spread wide on snow, acting like soft snowshoes that leave prints almost as clear as human footprints. The stare is cold and steady, holding on to a target for a long time without even a small twitch. From the side, the body looks low and stretched, built more like a spring coil than a normal cat. Resting spots are often high ledges, where any sound from below reaches much earlier than any danger. Gorka district is the hill region where a war kingdom grew strong enough to pull scattered lands into one rule. The place became known for fearless fighters who treated steep ground as an advantage rather than a curse. Warriors trained on narrow ridges where one slip meant a fall, sharpening balance as much as skill with weapons. Some fighters swore oaths while cutting their own forearms, then pressed the blood against temple walls as proof that backing out was no longer possible. Secret trails linked hill villages, letting messengers cross from one side to another faster than any army could chase them. Local fighters charge even uphill in thin air, using short curved blades that cut through armour like it was dry bark. Above this, Gorkha Durbar rests on its own ridge, holding the core stories of conquest, blood oaths, and royal rise. Before big campaigns, animal blood was poured into stone pits in this building's courtyard, staining the ground so dark that some patches never fully lightened again. During one siege, defenders rolled burning oil and stones from the upper terraces, turning the steep access path into a death ramp. Spies once had their tongues cut out in a side chamber, then were thrown down the slope, as a warning to anyone planning to sell secrets. Some historians still argue that assassinations linked to the rise of power here were staged as accidents inside Durbar stairwells. Furthermore, night guards here used to hear the clanking of armour in empty corridors long after the last soldier had left the fort. Due to this, palace workers leave food at certain doorways at night, not for people, but to keep restless guests from disturbing sleeping rooms. Birendra Lake is a nearby cold glacial lake, lying under a huge wall of ice, catching meltwater directly from the Manaslu Glacier. In past winters, the surface froze solid enough that some trekkers walked on it, yet nobody could say for certain how thick the ice really was beneath their boots. The lake has a sacred side too, with visitors bathing or dipping hands in the near-freezing water to wash away bad luck picked up on the Manaslu trails. Often, they would also get an extra rock and take it along as a charm, or leave another offering when they head to pray in the Manakamana temple. The first shrine at this site appeared after a royal body vanished from its funeral fire, leaving no ashes. For a long time, no one would sleep alone on the temple terrace, after a guard said he heard chanting behind him all night while the courtyard stood empty. Priests would collapse suddenly during big ceremonies in the past, then woke up claiming no memory of the chanting they had just finished. During certain eclipses, the temple doors were kept shut because strange behaviour in animals and sudden fainting spells among visitors had been noted on earlier ones. During one festival long ago, a stampede on the stone stairs injured several people, and certain steps are still avoided by older worshippers. In addition, people who broke vows made at the temple later returned in secret to offer bigger sacrifices, afraid some unseen force was collecting on the promise. Nuwakot hilltop fort crowns a high ridge nearby, once used as a power seat, where control over nearby valleys shifted hands through contests and war. It gained fame from a race where the fastest runner to the top on a set day would rule the area for the next cycle. Barpak village, on the other hand, is a nearby residential area once shook violently, causing dwellings to drop one floor in a single moment, turning upper rooms into ground level. Terraced fields slipped in layers, leaving perfect stair steps ripped and hanging with nothing below them. Rescue teams flew in from across borders, with helicopters hovering low over Barpak's ridge, where dust storms rose from the roofs and hid the whole village in a brown cloud. People later dug cooking pots and jewellery out of the ruins like treasure hunters, each find coming with a memory of who once used it. At night, people slept in open fields, afraid of their own houses, while aftershocks made the ground thump like a giant heartbeat. Meanwhile, some would rather stay in Cedar Cave than face the earth's wrath again, even if it means dealing with ghosts. The first steps off the ladder here feel like stepping into a giant throat that swallowed whole crowds in the past. During early explorations, people got lost inside tunnels and circled for hours, finally returning to the entrance from the opposite direction they expected. When all lights go off, the cave does not go fully black, but holds a faint grey glow, as if the stone remembers daylight. Early villagers used it as a refuge during conflict, hiding deep inside while fighting raged in the forest above. After long stays, some people step back into daylight, feeling like they left a piece of themselves in the dark, as if the cave keeps a share of every visitor. Far above these underground halls, sure-footed Himalayan tar move along cliff faces that hang over similar drops without slipping. They carry heavy bodies on tiny hooves that grip bare rock ledges where a human boot would slide instantly. Their thick coat forms layers that trap air, turning their own fur into a living blanket against brutal mountain cold. Males grow backward curving horns that sweep along the skull like hooked blades, used to slam rivals during cliff edge fights. Short tails flick constantly as they walk, helping balance tiny shifts in weight on narrow ridges. Whole groups move together across steep slopes like a single shifting shadow, each hoof landing exactly where the one before did. Herds often feed on high ridges above remote routes that lead toward the secluded areas of places like Sum Valley. It is a remote site often called a hidden valley of meditation, tucked behind steep walls and reached by long narrow trails. This place was once sealed off as a refuge for serious meditation, where only the most committed were allowed to enter. It turned into a no-kill zone, overnight after a terrified deer ran into a meditation spot, and every hunter threw away weapons on the spot. Along its brighter parts, flashes of blue and orange from the common kingfisher dart over the water like moving sparks. It has a compact body with a huge head and long pointed bill built like a tiny spear. Its plumage glows electric blue on the back and warm orange on the chest, turning the bird into a flying jewel over dull water. Eyes sit high and forward, giving sharp depth vision that judges distance to a fish with scary accuracy. The bird waits motionless on a perch above a pond, then dives headfirst like a thrown arrow when a fish moves. Special membranes cover its eyes during the dive, turning them into built-in goggles underwater. Short legs and small feet grip branches tightly, letting the bird hold still for long stretches while watching for prey. Bandipur hill town was a busy trade stop, with stone-paved streets and houses lined up along the spine of the hill. During its peak, merchants controlled trade routes that moved goods between high mountain passes and lowland markets, making Bandipur wealthier than many bigger towns. When the district headquarters moved away, angry residents occupied government buildings and forced civil servants to flee in the night. Inns hosted traders, arriving with caravans after days on dangerous trails, filled with bandits and wild animals. During leech season, the wet undergrowth became a moving carpet, and anyone who stopped too long walked away with legs streaked in red. Above those slopes, white-rumped vultures once circled on rising air, scanning the ground below for the slightest sign of prey. It has a dark body with a bright white patch above the tail that flashes clearly when the bird spreads its wings. Its wings are long and broad, built to ride rising warm air for hours with almost no flapping. The neck is mostly bare skin, which stays cleaner when the bird reaches deep into carcasses. Sharp eyes scan huge areas from high in the sky, spotting weak animals long before ground animals notice. Whole groups gather at a carcass and chase each other with hunched wings, turning feeding into a fast, tense scramble. After gorging on a meal, the vulture sits in the sun with wings spread, drying feathers and letting heat kill leftover bacteria. Sindupalchok district is a region of high hills and river gorges that has faced severe earthquakes and major landslides. People in this area rebuilt homes multiple times on the same unstable ground, choosing to stay close to fields and land. Many families adapted by building lighter houses and spreading relatives across different villages to reduce the risk of losing everyone at once. Fog and rain sometimes cut the place off for days, leaving roads blocked and forcing people to move supplies on foot along risky trails. In the forested slopes there, a shy creature called the Chinese pangolin moves at night, trying to cover itself from the dangers. It is a small mammal covered head to tail in hard keratin scales that lock together like armour plates. When scared, it curls into a tight ball, using those scales as a living shield, while a long sticky tongue waits inside to scoop up ants once danger passes. Langtang Valley held a tight chain of villages, felt safely tucked below white peaks. One day the ground shook hard enough that a slice of Langtang Lirung broke loose, turning rock, glacier, and a hanging lake into a white wall rushing toward the village. The avalanche smashed into the settlement with such force that a pressure wave of air alone flattened forests on the opposite side of the corridor. Houses, lodges and fields were buried under meters of mixed ice and stone, leaving no clear line between where the village ended and the landslide began. People running through the green meadows were picked up by the blast of air and thrown across the corridor, their bodies later found far from where their footprints ended. In the same place, among rock piles and grass patches, the tiny Himalayan pika darts between stones, acting like a new nervous pulse in a location that once went silent. It spends summer dashing around like a frantic gardener, cutting plants and drying them into hay piles that become secret winter food stacks hidden under boulders. Gorapani Reservoir is a long, dark lake, held back by a high dam, built to trap river water and turn it into electricity for faraway towns. Not long after construction, engineers found cracks and unstable slopes above the basin, raising the fear that a single huge slide could throw a wall of waves over the crest. During one fierce monsoon, heavy rain triggered landslides around the catchment, feeding the reservoir with mud and rock and pushing the level dangerously close to the top. Fishermen on night boats talk about sudden whirlpools that appear in calm water, spinning in one spot as if something huge moved under the surface. After heavy storms, the colour can shift from clear to thick brown in a single day, as if the hills around the lake are bleeding soil into the basin. Along the quieter coves of Gorapani, white egrets stand in perfect stillness at the edge of the dark water, like pale markers waiting to lift off if anything down there goes wrong. They wear pure white feathers over long, thin black legs that let them stalk through shallow water without making a ripple. Their necks fold into a tight S shape that can spring forward in a blur, stabbing fish or insects with a spear-sharp yellow bill. An egret can stand frozen for long stretches, using stillness as a hunting trick that lures prey into thinking the bird is just another pale stump. In groups, egrets spread out in loose lines across wetlands, each bird keeping just enough space to spot movement without bumping into the next hunter. During flight, their necks tuck back while their legs trail straight behind, giving them a strange, stretched-out shape against the sky. When startled, a resting flock can lift off at once in a flare of white wings, turning a quiet marsh into a sudden snowstorm of feathers. This is Nepal, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of the USA's national parks, check out this video.